Dad's socket wrench wasn't heavy, just honest. I'd held it so many times over the years, its grooves fit my hand better than most handshakes ever did. That wrench sat on the edge of my brother's workbench like it belonged there, which it didn't, at least not without an explanation. It took me a second to say anything, not because I was shocked. That part had come and gone. I was just tired. The week Dad died, I didn't cry much. People noticed. My wife asked if I was bottling it. My son, who's 7, kept climbing into my lap like I might break if he wasn't holding me together. I appreciated it, but I wasn't fragile. I was just busy. There's a kind of grief that gets buried under logistics, caskets, probate, phone calls, hospice bills, the leftover soup in the fridge. I was deep in that kind. I hadn't even touched the deeper layers yet. That would come later. My brother, Mason, didn't help with much. He came to the funeral, said the right words, hugged the right people. But once Dad was buried and the food was packed up, he vanished. No follow-up, no sorting, no effort to help clear the old house. Just gone. So I did it myself. Packed every drawer, hauled every box, donated most of Dad's clothes, kept the flannel he used to wear every winter, gave the recliner to a neighbor, drove a trailer full of junk to the dump, paid for the lock change myself. But one thing didn't make sense. The tools. Dad's garage was his kingdom. He wasn't rich, but his collection was his pride. Decades of carefully chosen ratchets, torque wrenches, vintage chisels, and hand-lathed grips lined the pegboard with methodical precision. When I went to catalog them, they were gone. Not moved, not boxed. Gone. I thought maybe Mason had taken them to keep them safe. I texted, called, emailed, left a voicemail that ran longer than it should have. No reply for 4 days. When he finally answered, it was with a single line. I think Dad sold a bunch of that stuff off before he got sick. It didn't sit right. Dad was tight with money, but he never parted with those tools. Even after the cancer took his ability to stand more than 10 minutes at a time, he still had me fetch specific ones from the wall just to clean them. I pushed Mason on it, gently at first. He brushed me off, said I was getting worked up over a couple $100 in metal. I let it go, for the moment. But then today, 3 weeks later, I visited Mason's place to drop off a box of Dad's old Navy memorabilia. Figured maybe he'd want it. We hadn't really sat down since the funeral. I didn't expect much from the visit, just a handoff, maybe a cup of coffee. But when he stepped out to take a phone call, I wandered into the garage. And there it was, Dad's wrench, sitting right on the bench. Not just the wrench, either. I recognized the rest instantly. The old lathe with the faded marker line he'd used to measure my hand for a custom handle. The Milwaukee drill with the worn sticker I'd peeled halfway as a kid. Even the battered toolbox with L.T. Coleman scratched faintly into the lid. Every goddamn piece. Lined up in Mason's garage like trophies. I was still standing there when Mason came back in. He stopped halfway through the doorway. Looked at me, then the tools, then back at me. Oh, that. No apology, no explanation, just that. What are they doing here? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. He scratched the back of his neck. I meant to tell you. I grabbed them before you started clearing things out. Figured they'd just get thrown away otherwise. You told me Dad sold them. He didn't say anything. You told me they were gone. They might as well have been, he muttered, then added, you were already handling everything else. Thought I'd take something that actually meant something to me. I blinked. You didn't even tell me. I didn't think I had to. We stood there in silence. The garage was stuffy, and the overhead bulb buzzed like a gnat in my ear. You could have asked, I said finally. I would have said yes. Mason crossed his arms. Would you? And there it was. The shift. The unspoken resentment I hadn't known was brewing. Later that night, I sat in my car outside his house for 20 minutes before driving home. I didn't take the tools. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out, got in, and left. But something cracked that day. Not just between me and Mason, but inside me too. It wasn't about the tools, it was about trust. And now, I'm wondering how many other things he's taken, not just from Dad, but from me. 3 days after that, my son, Dylan, asked if we could go see Uncle Mason. I said we'd see. That was a lie. I don't want to see Mason again, but I know I will. Because there's more to this, and I need to know the truth, even if it hurts. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I found myself staring at a cup of coffee I'd already reheated twice. It sat on the counter, cold again, next to a pair of lunchboxes. My son's and mine. I packed his snack, forgot mine. I buttoned the wrong sleeve before I realized my shirt was inside out. I kept hearing Mason's voice from the garage. Would you? That smug, half-smiling challenge lodged somewhere deep in my chest, like a splinter I couldn't dig out. He wasn't asking if I would have let him take the tools. He was asking if I'd ever really shared anything at all. And maybe, just maybe, that was a fair question. We were raised in the same house, but not in the same way. Dad was a Navy man, disciplined, loyal, no tolerance for excuses. I was the firstborn, the rule follower, the one who got up early and saluted the day like it was a commander. Mason, on the other hand, always seemed to have a knack for bending rules without breaking them. He could talk his way out of anything. When we were kids, we'd both help Dad in the garage. At first, Mason liked it. He'd sneak extra sockets into his pockets and challenge me to guess which ones were missing. But once he hit his teens, he started skipping out. He'd sneak out the side door just before Dad called us. Said the fumes gave him a headache. Said he had homework. Said a lot of things. I stuck around. I learned the torque settings for every lug nut on Dad's old El Camino. I sanded shelves by hand, replaced wires, installed shelves, changed oil, rewired the fuse box when Dad said it was time to stop being useless. Mason, meanwhile, joined the debate team, got into marketing, built a career selling people things they didn't need, and made 6 figures doing it. Now, he was the one with the nicer house, the newer car, the better suits, the bigger TV. And Dad's damn tools in his garage. I told myself I didn't care about the money. That wasn't the point. But sometime around midnight, I found myself checking eBay for vintage socket sets. Dad's exact model sold for close to $1,200. The drill alone was pushing $600. That lathe? Rare. Mint. Maybe irreplaceable. I didn't want to sell them, but I hated knowing Mason could. I hated that he'd hidden them. And I hated that he'd lied. The next weekend, my wife's sister came into town, which meant the house was full of wine, loud laughter, and those weird seaweed snacks I can't stand. I used it as an excuse to get out of the house. Told Katie I needed to run an errand, and drove aimlessly until I found myself back in front of Dad's house. It was still empty. We hadn't listed it yet, mostly because I hadn't decided what to do with it. I unlocked the side door with the spare key under the old turtle planter, walked in, and was hit with the smell. Old grease, dust, pine cleaner, ghosts of every Saturday afternoon I'd spent there. The garage was still clean, empty pegboards, swept floor, the same flickering bulb. I stood there and imagined Dad in his faded jeans and shop apron, sleeves rolled to the elbows, face weathered but proud. And then I saw something new. A box in the corner I didn't recognize. I opened it. Inside were receipts, dozens of them, handwritten invoices, notes in Dad's careful, blocky print, a folder marked Estate. Inside that folder, a small sealed envelope addressed to my sons, open together. I sat down hard on the workbench stool. The envelope trembled in my hands, but I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I called Mason. He didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. I texted. Dad left us something. In the garage. Says to open together. No response. 5 minutes. 10. I stared at the envelope. Wondered what it said. Wondered if I had the right to read it alone. Finally, Mason replied, "Can't today. Busy. Just open it if you want." I didn't. Not out of principle. Not really. I just wanted to do one thing right. One thing the way Dad asked. So I waited. That night, I told Katie everything. About the tools, the lie, the envelope. She asked if I wanted her to come with me next time. I said no. This wasn't about mediation. It was about memory, about legacy, about something I couldn't name without sounding dramatic. She didn't press, just reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Don't let this become something you regret," she said. I didn't know what she meant then. I do now. 2 days later, Mason showed up. He didn't knock, just walked into Dad's house like he still lived there, which he hadn't in over 15 years. I was already waiting in the garage. He looked tired, or maybe just annoyed. "You dragged me out here for what? Some dusty letter?" I held it up. "He wrote it to both of us." He didn't move. After a long beat, I offered it to him. "You open it." He rolled his eyes. "Jesus, fine." He broke the seal, read silently. His expression shifted, annoyance first, then confusion, then something else I couldn't place. He handed it to me. It said, "Boys, I know things haven't always been even between you. That's my fault as much as anyone's. This house, the car, and the savings are yours to split. But the tools, those are meant to be used, not sold, not hoarded, not displayed like trophies. Used. Together, if you can manage it. Dad." Mason didn't say anything for a long time. Then he laughed. A sharp, bitter little exhale. "Used together," he repeated. Of course he'd write that. Classic Dad. I folded the letter. He wasn't wrong. Maybe not. He looked at me. "But you already think they're yours, don't you?" I blinked. "What?" "You think just because you helped him fix the El Camino and learned the torque settings and swept the garage, that makes you the heir. It's not about being the heir. Isn't it?" His voice wasn't loud, but it had weight. "I spent years trying to get out from under his thumb," Mason went on. You just kept squeezing tighter. You don't even see it. That's not fair." "No, but it's true." We didn't yell. We didn't fight. We just stood there, two grown men surrounded by the legacy of a man who never really gave either of us what we needed in the same way. We didn't come to an agreement that night. We didn't split the tools. We didn't even decide what to do with them. But for the first time in years, I saw Mason not as my rival, but as someone else who'd lost the same man in a different way. And maybe, just maybe, we could figure this out. But it was going to get worse before it got better. Because the truth wasn't done with us yet. It was a Thursday when I found out about the shed. Not the garage, not the basement, not the attic. The shed. The one in the back, corner of Dad's property, tucked behind the ivy and rusting lawn furniture, half swallowed by a rotting fence post and years of neglect. I'd barely given it a glance during all my trips here after the funeral. It was the kind of place you assumed held garden rakes, bags of salt, and maybe a squirrel nest or two. But when the realtor came by to prep for listing the house, she flagged it during the walkthrough. "There's a padlock on this one," she said. "Do you have the key?" I didn't. Mason didn't either. Or so he claimed. I'll admit it. I didn't believe him. Not after the lie about the tools. Not after the way he'd looked at Dad's letter like it was some cruel joke instead of the man's last wish. But instead of accusing him outright, I changed the approach. "Think we can pop it open?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Mason shrugged. "It's probably empty, or full of termites." But I saw it. That flicker. Barely half a second. Something between recognition and regret. He knew something. It took me 2 days to go back. I kept finding reasons to delay. Had to work late. Dylan had a spelling test. Katie's car needed an oil change. The truth was, I wasn't sure I wanted to know what was inside. But curiosity is a persistent bastard. So, Saturday morning, I packed a crowbar and a drill, left a note for Katie, and drove back to Dad's house alone. The sky was overcast, humid in that heavy, pre-storm kind of way. The kind of air that made your shirt stick to your back before you even got out of the car. I didn't go through the house, just walked straight around to the backyard, stepping over broken pavers and weeds that reached my knees. The shed was smaller than I remembered. Aluminum, painted red once, now mostly rust. The padlock was thick, newer than the door it clung to. The crowbar didn't take long. Just 2 pops and a grunt of effort, and the latch gave way. Inside, it smelled like old paper and something sweeter. Varnish, maybe. There was a single bulb hanging from a frayed cord. I pulled it. Flicker. Then light. Dim. Yellow. Enough to see dust motes hanging like smoke. And there it was. A workbench. Another one. Not as polished as the garage setup, but still organized. Wooden tool racks. A shelf full of sanding blocks and oil cans. Sketches pinned to the wall with pushpins. Half-carved pieces of wood. A lined notebook open to a page with my name on it. And Mason's. I stepped closer. The notebook was a project list. Not finished ones. Future ones. Bench for Nate's back porch. Use cedar if budget allows. Custom bike ramp for Dylan. Refinish Mason's desk drawers. Check if dimensions match old study. Knife handle set, 1 for each. Each note was in Dad's blocky print, dated. Some had question marks next to them. Some had measurements. None were crossed out. They were plans. For things he wanted to do for us. Maybe before he got too sick. Maybe before he ran out of time. And there, tucked in the corner, was a shoebox. Inside, photos. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Dad, Mason, me. Sometimes all together. Sometimes not. One of us at the beach with matching sunburns and paper plates full of corn. One where Mason and I were sanding a piece of driftwood, our faces young and tight with concentration. One where Dad was sleeping in the garage chair with a book over his chest and a dog, our old mutt, Riggs, curled up under him. But one photo stood out. A Polaroid, slightly overexposed, edges curling. Mason holding a half-built chair, smiling. Not posing, smiling. Happy. You don't see that much in old pictures unless someone's watching for it. I wasn't watching for it before. Now I couldn't stop seeing it. I called him again. No answer. So I sent him a picture of the notebook page with our names. Then I just sat there, on the old work stool, let the air hum around me. About 20 minutes later, I heard his truck pull up. He didn't knock, didn't shout, just walked into the backyard like he'd known I'd find it eventually. He stood in the doorway, stared at the bench, then the photos, then me. "I didn't think you'd come out here," he said quietly. "You knew about this." He nodded once. "Why didn't you say anything?" He sat down on the overturned crate near the back wall, exhaled. "I found it by accident, week after he died. Came to pick up some of my old stuff, walked past the shed, saw the lock was new. Figured it was worth a look." "You didn't think maybe we should go through it together?" "I didn't think you'd want to." That stung more than I wanted to admit. "I thought you'd see it as proof I was wrong," he went on. "About the tools, about everything. That you'd take it as one more thing I screwed up." "Mason," I started, but he wasn't done. "I didn't lie to steal from you. I lied because I thought if I asked, you'd make it conditional. That I could have the tools if I did things your way. If I made peace on your terms. I didn't want to be your project, Nate." I sat back. Let that settle. "You think I see you like a project?" "Always have." That was hard to argue. I'd always been the fixer, the planner, the one who sent texts like reminders and gave advice when no one asked for it. It's how I coped. With Dad. With adulthood. With the silence grief leaves behind. "I'm not trying to run your life," I said finally. "But I wanted us to be in this together." "I know," he said, softer now. "I just didn't know how." We went through the notebook together, page by page. Some plans were half-baked, some were pretty detailed. The knife handles? Dad had already started carving the blanks. The bench? He'd measured for my deck last fall. There was a lot of love in those pages. Quiet, practical, unfinished love. The kind that looks like chores until you read between the lines. Later that night, Mason said something I didn't expect. "We could finish some of these." I looked at him. "For real?" "Yeah, I mean, maybe not all of them, but the ones that matter." I nodded. "That'd be good." He paused. "You still mad at me?" I thought about it. "Yeah," I said honestly, "but not for the reasons I thought." He gave a half smile. "Same." We sat in silence for a while. Then I handed him the wrench. "The handle's cracked," I said. He ran his thumb over it. "Think we can fix it?" "Yeah, I think we can." We haven't decided what to do with the rest of the tools yet, but for the first time in a long while, we're talking. And maybe that's a start. But the past still isn't done with us, because the will hasn't been read yet. And there's one more secret coming. The lawyer's office smelled like lemon cleaner and anxiety. Mason and I sat on opposite sides of a low mahogany table, both of us dressed like we were going to a wake. Dark shirts, stiff collars, and tension hiding in the creases of our sleeves. Neither of us had spoken since we got there. Not because we were angry. That part had cooled. But we were both waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because whatever Dad wrote in that notebook, he'd also written a will. And for all we'd seen and shared over the last few weeks, tools, memories, the shed, that unfinished bench project, there was still one thing neither of us could say out loud. We didn't really know what Dad thought of us. Not deep down, not objectively, not when it came to what he'd leave behind. The lawyer, a compact woman with steel gray hair and a voice like gravel, introduced herself as Mrs. Franks. She'd worked with Dad for years, she said he liked to do things the old-fashioned way. That tracked. He made a few changes in the last 6 months of his life, she added, flipping through a folder. But most of the structure remained intact. She looked at us, one by one, like a teacher about to reveal exam results. "Are you ready?" I glanced at Mason. He gave the smallest nod. "Yeah," I said. "Let's hear it." The will wasn't dramatic. No surprise fortunes. No long letters from beyond the grave. But there were details. The house, as we already knew, was to be split between us. Liquid assets as well, retirement savings, investments, all that. Half and half. No shock there. The car, Dad's beloved El Camino, was officially mine. Mason didn't flinch at that. He hadn't even looked at the car since the funeral. That was fine. He wasn't sentimental about vehicles. But then came the part that changed everything. "The workshop," Mrs. Franks read aloud, "including all tools, materials, and future project plans, is to be entrusted to whichever son agrees to maintain it as a functioning, shared space." She looked up. "There's a clause. If neither of you agrees, or if you fail to collaborate meaningfully within 1 year, it gets donated to the county vocational school." I blinked. "He wants us to co-own it?" "Not just co-own," she said. "Co-use. Together, for the purpose of creating, maintaining, or teaching craftsmanship." Mason sat back in his chair. "You've got to be kidding me." But she wasn't. Outside the office, we stood on the sidewalk under a sky full of bruised clouds. The rain hadn't started yet, but you could feel it thinking about it. Mason shoved his hands into his pockets. "So that's it, huh?" I nodded slowly. "Guess he really meant it." Mason let out a dry laugh. He always did like a good punishment wrapped in a life lesson. "It's not a punishment," I said. "It's a challenge." He looked at me. "You ever think maybe he didn't know how else to say he loved us?" I didn't answer, because I had, more than once. We didn't talk again for a week. I think we both needed the silence, to digest what it meant to be tied to each other through a man who was no longer around to referee. But then Saturday came. I was in the backyard with Dylan, trying to fix the warped deck step. He was using the rubber mallet like a toy hammer, proudly helping. That's when I heard tires crunch on gravel. Mason's truck. He stepped out with something under his arm. A canvas roll. I recognized it instantly. Dad's chisel set. Mason unrolled it on the deck step next to me. I figured we should start with the bench, he said, voice quieter than usual. The cedars still stacked in the shed. I didn't say anything, just moved over and made space. Dylan looked up at Mason. You helping us? Guess so, Mason said. Dylan beamed. Cool. And that was that. Over the next few weeks, we started small. The bench, then the drawer refinishing, a new birdhouse for Dylan's school project, a coffee table for Mason's guest room. Each project wasn't just wood and screws, it was friction and memory and practice. Some days we argued about angle cuts, glue brands, stain finishes, but we kept showing up, and that meant something. One night, while we were sanding the bench's final board, Mason spoke up without looking at me. Did you ever find that letter? I frowned. Which one? In the envelope, he said. The one Dad told me about. Said he left it in the El Camino, under the driver's seat. I stared at him. He told you that? Few weeks before he passed. I thought he was hallucinating. Never checked. I didn't waste another second. We found it 20 minutes later, folded neatly in an envelope marked private. It wasn't long, just 2 paragraphs. Nate, you always held things together. You showed up. You carried more than your share. I didn't say that enough, and I'm sorry for it. Mason needed different things. I didn't always know how to give them. I know I left gaps. You both filled them in different ways. You did better than I did. Please take care of each other. The rest doesn't matter. Dad. I read it twice before handing it to Mason. He didn't say anything, just folded it back and placed it on the passenger seat of his truck like it was made of glass. When he turned to look at me, his eyes were wet. Do you think he forgave us? He asked. I shook my head. I think he never blamed us. That night, I stayed up late in the garage, alone, staring at the workbench, the tools, the marks on the wall where the pegboard had held a life's worth of effort and routine. I thought about how grief hides in strange places, in old chisels, in quiet letters, in brothers who don't know how to say, I miss you, without sanding something first. And I realized something. The real inheritance wasn't the tools, it was the work. The bench is finished now, cedar slatted, smooth to the touch, sealed against weather. We stained it a deep walnut that matches nothing on my back porch, but it looks exactly how Dad would have wanted. Not perfect, but solid, honest, like something that was meant to be used, not admired. Dylan helped me drag it outside yesterday morning. He climbed up onto it, sat cross-legged, and declared it Grandpa Strong. That's his highest rating, better than cool or awesome. It means he trusts it enough to jump off without worrying it'll tip. Mason smiled when I told him. We're going to build another one, this time for his place. The workshop, our father's garage, is officially ours now, not just on paper, not just in the lawyer's files, but in use, in habit, in shared routine. We don't keep a schedule, but somehow we both end up there a few evenings a week, sometimes just sanding, sometimes talking, sometimes just being in the same space without needing to perform for each other. The projects vary. Shelves for Katie, a spice rack Mason's wife requested, some little stuff for Dylan's school. But more than the finished products, it's the rhythm that matters. The way we move around each other now. That's new. That's earned. There's still tension, sure. He still drives me crazy when he skips measurements or eyeballs something that clearly needs a level. And I know I drive him up the wall when I redo something he's already fine-tuned. But now, at least, we call each other out with a smirk instead of a scowl. That's growth, I think. Last week, we found another envelope. It was tucked behind a panel in one of Dad's tool drawers, the one with the broken latch that always caught your skin if you weren't careful. It wasn't labeled, just folded in quarters and paper-clipped. Inside was a photo of Dad as a young man, 20-something, smiling in a way we'd never really seen him do in person. No uniform, no stern jaw, no set shoulders. He looked relaxed. Taped to the back was a small note in handwriting we didn't recognize. He built this bench for me the summer we met. Still use it every day. Hope you find your own way forward. M. Mason and I looked at each other. Mom? I asked. He shook his head. No, this isn't Mom's writing. We stared at it for a long time. Neither of us said what we were thinking, but it hung in the air all the same. Dad had a life before us, before the Navy, before the version of him that became the man we spent decades trying to understand. Maybe he hadn't always been the person we knew. Maybe that's true for all of us. We haven't decided what to do with that photo yet. Part of me wants to frame it, keep it in the shed. Another part thinks it should stay hidden, like the drawer wanted it to be. But more than anything, it reminded me of something Mason said weeks ago, out by the truck. You ever think maybe he didn't know how else to say he loved us? Yeah, I think that's exactly what it was. I asked Mason the other night if he wanted to teach Dylan how to build something from scratch. He didn't answer right away, just picked up a scrap of pine, ran his thumb across the grain. What do you think he'd want to make? He finally asked. I shrugged. Doesn't matter, as long as he makes it. Mason nodded. We'll start with a birdhouse, he said. Then maybe a skateboard ramp. Dylan's eyes lit up when I told him. He's already picked the paint colors, bright green and orange, not subtle. But I figure that's okay. Dad's tools deserve to get loud once in a while. The thing is, grief doesn't end. It shifts, settles, takes up new space. Sometimes it's quiet, like dust in a shed you haven't opened in a while. Other times, it buzzes like the drill you forgot to charge before starting a big job. But it also builds. It can be worked into the grain of something good, something useful, something shared. Mason and I still have a long way to go. We're not brothers who text every day or share birthday dinners, but we're in the same room now, working, listening, passing tools back and forth without needing to explain what comes next. That's the legacy, I think. Not the things Dad left behind, but the way we choose to carry them forward. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like we're building something real. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.